Hello there, and welcome back to Cosmic Slumber. Tonight we are not chasing facts or wonders of the universe. Tonight we are simply going home, again and again, to 12 small worlds built for rest. A cottage buried in snow. A lighthouse at the edge of the sea. A treehouse full of old books. A bakery cooling after closing time. A midnight train sliding through silver fields. A greenhouse in soft rain. A cabin by a still lake. A bookshop after the last customer has gone. A harbour town falling quiet. An attic room under a slanted roof. An observatory, warm and dim, where the whole sky waits. A garden shed at dusk. A snowbound train station. And, at the very end, a farmhouse kitchen where the last candle is just about to go out. Each of these places was built for one purpose only: to hold you gently until your eyes grow too heavy to keep open. There is nowhere to be and nothing to solve. If you enjoy these long, slow journeys, you are welcome to like, subscribe, or leave a thought below. It helps other tired minds find their way here too, one soft night at a time. For now, let your hands go loose. Let your jaw unclench. Let your breathing slow until it finds its own gentle rhythm. Settle in. We begin in the mountains, in the snow, in a small stone cottage with a light in the window. The snow began falling before the sun went down, and by the time the sky turned the color of wood smoke, the whole valley had gone soft and white. A stone cottage sat alone near the tree line, its chimney breathing a thin column of smoke straight up into the still air, because tonight there was no wind at all, only snow, drifting down in slow, unhurried flakes as if it had nowhere else to be. Inside, the fire had burned down to a low orange glow, just enough to warm the room without demanding attention, and every few minutes a log would shift and settle with a soft, comfortable creak. A kettle sat on the stove, not yet whistling, its quiet hiss rising and falling like a small mechanical breath. Thick wool blankets were piled at the foot of a low bed near the window, and someone had left a candle burning on the sill, its flame bending gently whenever the old glass let in a whisper of cold from outside. Outside that window, the world had lost its edges. Fences, paths, and low stone walls had all been rounded into gentle white shapes, and the mountains beyond had vanished into a pale haze where sky and slope no longer had a clear line between them. A single set of footprints led up to the door and stopped there, meaning whoever lived here was already home, already safe, already sitting somewhere warm with nowhere left to go. The cottage did not need much. A fire, a kettle, a window to watch the snow fall, and 4 solid walls holding the cold outside where it belonged. There is a particular kind of quiet that only comes with heavy snow, a hush that presses gently on everything, muffling footsteps, softening sound, wrapping the whole valley in something close to silence. Somewhere under that hush, in the little stone cottage with the glowing window, someone has already fallen asleep in the chair by the fire, a book resting open on their chest, rising and falling slowly with each breath. The snow will keep falling long after the candle burns out. It does not need anyone awake to watch it. It only needed someone warm enough, and safe enough, to finally let go. Let that image settle now, the cottage, the snow, the low fire burning itself down to embers. We drift from the mountains toward the coast, toward salt air and slow water, toward a tower of white stone standing watch over a dark sea. The lighthouse stood at the very end of the point, where the land gave up and the water took over, its beams sweeping slow, patient circles across the black water below. Inside, the keeper had already finished the evening's small rituals. The logbook was closed. The lamp had been checked and checked again, though it hardly needed it anymore, since the mechanism turned itself with quiet clockwork precision, gears ticking softly in the dark like a patient heartbeat. A narrow spiral staircase wound down from the lamp room to a small warm kitchen, where a pot of tea sat cooling slightly on a wooden table scarred by decades of quiet evenings just like this one. The keeper sat by the window with a blanket over their knees, watching the beam pass overhead every few seconds, a slow steady rhythm that had become, over the years, indistinguishable from the sound of their own breathing. Far below, waves moved against the rocks without urgency, arriving and retreating in a soft unhurried hush that had likely not changed in 100 years. There was no storm tonight, no wind worth mentioning, only the vast dark water stretching out toward a horizon that could not be seen, and the small comfort of knowing the light above would keep turning whether anyone watched it or not. A ship far out at sea might catch a glimpse of that beam and feel, for just a moment, less alone in all that darkness. That was the quiet purpose of this whole tall tower, not to hold anyone in, but to remind whoever was out there in the black water that land was still somewhere close, that someone was still awake to tend the light, that the world had not entirely dissolved into night. The keeper's eyes grew heavier with each slow rotation of the beam, until finally the tea went fully cold and the blanket slipped a little further up, and sleep arrived the way it always did in this place, gradually, gently, timed to the patient turning of the light. Let the lighthouse fade now, its beams still circling somewhere behind you, steady and slow. We climb next into the branches of an old oak tree, up a rope ladder, into a small wooden room built just for reading, and resting, and forgetting the ground below. High in the branches of an ancient oak, reached by a rope ladder that swayed only slightly in the evening air, there was a small wooden room built entirely for quiet. Shelves lined every wall, packed with books whose spines had softened and faded from years of gentle handling, their titles nearly worn away by countless fingers running along them in search of just the right story. A single round window let in the last blue light of dusk, and a small lantern hung from a hook overhead, casting a warm circle of gold across a nest of cushions and folded quilts piled in the center of the floor. The leaves outside pressed gently against the walls whenever a breeze passed through, brushing the wood with a soft papery whisper, as though the whole tree were turning its own pages along with whoever sat reading below. A pot of chamomile tea steamed quietly on a low table, untouched for the moment, because the story open on someone's lap had become far more interesting than anything else in the world. Somewhere below, the rest of the forest had gone dark and still, but up here, held safely in the arms of old branches, the little room glowed like a lantern of its own, a small warm secret tucked into the canopy. Every book on every shelf held 100 other worlds, ready and waiting, patient the way only books can be, content to sit closed for years until the right hands opened them again. Tonight, only one book mattered, its pages turning slower and slower as eyes grew heavier, sentences drifting apart, words softening into half-formed thoughts. A bookmark slipped gently from someone's fingers, sliding into a chapter that would simply wait until morning, in no hurry at all, exactly like the old oak holding this whole small room steady in the dark. Let the treehouse rock softly now, cushions and quilts and the low gold lantern light. We come back down to the ground, into a village gone quiet, and step through the back door of a bakery just after closing. The ovens had gone cool an hour ago, but the whole bakery still held onto their warmth the way a held hand holds onto heat long after letting go. Flour dust drifted faintly in the last slant of evening light through the front window, settling slowly onto work tables that had been wiped clean, their wooden surfaces pale and soft from years of kneading and rolling. Rows of loaves sat cooling on wire racks along the back wall, their crusts crackling faintly now and then with a small dry sound as the bread continued to settle, the last of its inner heat easing gently out into the room. The smell of the day lingered everywhere, yeast and butter and something faintly like cinnamon, soaked so deeply into the walls and the wood that it never quite left, even hours after the last batch had come out of the oven. A single chair sat pulled up near the window, and in it, the baker had settled with a cup of tea, finally still after a day spent standing, kneading, shaping, and waiting for dough to rise. Outside, the street had gone quiet, shop fronts dark, footsteps rare, the occasional bicycle bell drifting past and fading into nothing. On the counter, a small paper bag held 2 rolls set aside for tomorrow's breakfast, warm still, faintly, through the paper. There is something deeply peaceful about a room that has just finished its work for the day, a kitchen gone still, its tools resting, its purpose fulfilled until morning asks it to begin again. The baker's eyes had begun to close between sips of tea, the day's early start and long hours finally catching up in the quiet stillness of the empty shop. Flour dust settled a little more. The loaves cooled a little further. And somewhere in that warm, sweet-smelling room, the whole day finally allowed itself to end. Let the bakery grow quiet now, the loaves cooling, the tea going lukewarm and forgotten. We step outside into the cool night air and board a train, its windows glowing gently as it slides through silver countryside toward nowhere in particular. The train moves slowly through open countryside, its wheels clicking against the rails in a steady, unhurried rhythm that felt less like machinery and more like a lullaby someone had built entirely by accident. Outside the windows, moonlit fields rolled past in long silver waves, dotted here and there with the dark shapes of sleeping farmhouses and the pale outlines of grazing animals standing still in the night. Inside the carriage, the lights had been dimmed low, just enough to read by, though most passengers had long since given up on their books and simply let their heads rest against the cool glass, watching the world drift by without needing to understand where exactly it was going. A porter moved quietly down the aisle, offering blankets to anyone who looked cold, his footsteps soft against the carpeted floor, careful not to disturb those who had already drifted off. Every few minutes, the train would pass through a small sleeping village, its lit windows flickering briefly past like scattered stars fallen down to earth, gone again almost as soon as they appeared. There was nowhere to be. That was the particular magic of a night train, the sense that movement itself had become a form of rest, that simply being carried forward, without effort, without decision, was enough. The gentle sway of the carriage rocked back and forth in a slow, steady rhythm, side to side, the exact motion of being rocked to sleep as a small child, except now the whole rolling countryside did the rocking instead of a parent's arms. Somewhere in the dining car, a kettle had been left just barely simmering, filling that end of the train with the faint smell of tea leaves and warm metal. The moon followed alongside the whole journey, never quite falling behind, patient and steady above the silver fields, watching over the train the way it watches over everything that moves slowly through the dark. Let the train slow now, its rhythm softening, the field sliding past a little more gently. We step off into a quiet garden, where rain has just begun to fall against the glass roof of a small greenhouse. Rain had started sometime after dusk, a soft, steady patter against the glass panes of a small greenhouse tucked at the edge of an old garden. Inside, the air stayed warm and thick with the smell of damp soil and green growing things, tomato vines curling up wooden stakes, herbs crowded together in clay pots along a low wooden bench, a few late-season flowers still holding their color in the dim evening light. A single oil lamp sat on an upturned crate, casting a small warm glow across the rows of plants, the leaves glistening faintly where raindrops had found their way through tiny gaps in the roof and traced slow paths downward. The sound of rain on glass is one of the oldest lullabies there is, an even, patient rhythm with no urgency in it at all, drops arriving and gathering and sliding away in an endless gentle pattern. A wooden bench sat pushed against the far wall, cushioned with an old folded blanket, clearly meant for exactly this purpose, for sitting quietly while rain fell outside and warmth gathered inside. Someone had left a mug of something warm on the small table nearby, steam curling upward to join the greenhouse's own gentle humidity, the two mingling into one soft cloud that blurred the edges of the lamplight. Outside, the rest of the garden had gone dark and glistening, rows of vegetables and flower beds all catching the rain in their own quiet way, but none of that mattered from inside this small glass room, where the only sound that counted was the steady percussion overhead. Eyes grow heavy easily in a place like this, lulled by warmth, by rain, by the smell of soil and green things growing patiently in the dark. The lamp flickered once, gently, as if agreeing that it was, in fact, time to rest. Let the rain keep falling on the glass, soft and steady, long after eyes have closed. We travel now to still water, to a cabin at the edge of a quiet lake, where a family has just finished the last of the evening's small chores. The lake had gone completely still by nightfall, its surface holding a near-perfect reflection of the darkening sky above, broken only occasionally by the soft ripple of a fish rising and falling again beneath the surface. A wooden cabin sat a short walk from the shoreline, its windows glowing amber against the deepening blue of dusk, smoke rising gently from its stone chimney in a thin, unhurried line. Inside, the day's small chores had all been finished, dishes dried and put away, the porch swept, a fire built up in the old stone hearth that crackled and popped softly, throwing warm shifting light across a room filled with mismatched furniture and years of comfortable wear. A dog lay curled near the fire, one ear twitching occasionally at some distant sound too faint for human ears, otherwise entirely at peace, paws twitching now and then through some private dream. On the porch outside, a set of rocking chairs sat empty now, though they still held the faint memory of the evening's conversation, quiet talk about nothing important, the kind that fills up a day at the lake without ever needing to matter. Fireflies drifted low over the water's edge, blinking on and off in slow, unpredictable rhythm, small floating lanterns with nowhere urgent to be. Somewhere upstairs, in a small room under a slanted roof, a single lamp still burned, its light spilling faintly onto a quilt-covered bed where the last member of the family had finally settled in for the night, listening to the muffled comfort of voices downstairs slowly quieting one by one. The lake outside made almost no sound at all, just the occasional gentle lap of water against the old wooden dock, patient and endless, the same sound it had likely made every single night for 100 years. Sleep comes easily near water like this, unhurried, deep, and complete, the whole cabin settling into stillness the way the lake had settled hours before. Let the cabin grow quiet now, the fire low, the dog fully asleep by the hearth. We move into town, down a narrow street, and slip through the door of an old bookshop just after the last customer has gone. The bell above the door had gone silent nearly an hour ago, the last customer long since wandered back out into the evening with a paper wrap parcel under one arm. Inside, the bookshop had settled into that particular hush that only comes after a day of gentle activity, shelves standing tall and crowded in every direction, their spines catching the low light in soft uneven patches of color. A single lamp burned near the back counter, where the shopkeeper sat finishing the day's small paperwork, though the pen had slowed considerably, drifting into long pauses between each line. Dust motes floated lazily in the lamp's warm circle of light, rising and falling in slow spirals with no particular direction, the same unhurried drift as everything else in the shop tonight. Somewhere near the front window, a cat had curled itself into a tight, comfortable circle atop a stack of unsorted books, tail wrapped neatly over its nose, entirely unconcerned with a late hour or anything at all beyond its own next breath. The narrow aisles between shelves had grown shadowy toward the back of the shop, where afternoon light no longer reached, leaving whole sections of poetry and old maps tucked into a soft, comfortable darkness. Every book in the building held some kind of small sleeping story inside it. Characters paused mid-sentence, waiting patiently for tomorrow's readers to return and carry them forward again. The shopkeeper closed the ledger at last, setting the pen down with a quiet click, and allowed themselves one long, slow breath, the kind that marks the true end of a working day. Outside, the street lamps had come on one by one, casting soft pools of gold along the empty sidewalk, and somewhere above the shop, In a small flat with a slanted ceiling, a kettle had just begun its own slow climb toward a whistle nobody was in any hurry to hear. Let the bookshop fall fully still now, the cat asleep, the lamp burning low. We walk down toward the water once more, this time to a small harbour town where the boats have all come home for the night. The harbour had gone quiet with the tide, boats rocking gently against their moorings in a slow rhythmic sway that matched the soft lapping of water against old wooden posts. Strings of small lights had been hung along the length of the dock, reflecting in broken golden ribbons across the dark water below, swaying whenever a boat shifted or a light breeze passed through. The fishing boats had returned hours ago, their nets hung out to dry along the railings, salt-crusted ropes coiled neatly on weathered decks, everything settled into its proper place until morning called it back to work. A small cafe near the water's edge had just closed its shutters, though a warm light still glowed faintly from somewhere inside, where the owner moved slowly through the last small tasks of the evening, wiping down counters, stacking chairs, humming some tune too quiet to fully make out. Cats moved along the dock in loose, unhurried patrols, pausing occasionally to sniff at coiled rope or sit and watch the water for a while before continuing on their rounds. Somewhere further along the harbour wall, an old fisherman sat with a cup of something warm, watching the tide with the patient stillness of someone who had watched 1,000 tides before and expected to watch 1,000 more. The town behind the harbour had gone dark window by window, each house settling into its own version of the same quiet, until only a scattered handful of lit windows remained, holding their small warm glow against the larger dark. Somewhere out past the harbour mouth, the open sea stretched away into blackness, calm tonight, untroubled, content to simply exist without demanding anything of the small sleeping town beside it. The boats continued their slow gentle rocking, tethered safely, swaying with the water in a rhythm as old and steady as breathing itself. Let the harbour rock gently now, boats swaying, lights reflecting soft and broken on the water. We follow a narrow staircase up now, into an attic room tucked beneath a slanted roof, where rain has just begun again, tapping softly overhead. Under the slanted roof of an old house, tucked into the highest room of all, rain had just begun to fall again, tapping a soft uneven rhythm against the shingles just overhead. The attic room was small but warm, its low ceiling sloping down on one side to meet a single round window that looked out over rooftops and treetops now blurred slightly by the falling rain. A patchwork quilt covered the narrow bed in one corner, stitched together over years from old shirts and worn-out dresses, each square carrying some small forgotten story inside its faded pattern. A shelf along the far wall held a collection of small treasures, smooth stones, pressed flowers gone flat and pale, a few postcards from places visited long ago, each object holding more weight in memory than in size. The rain grew steadier outside, tapping and pattering against the roof directly overhead in a sound that felt almost like being inside a drum, gentle and enclosing rather than loud, a soft percussion built specifically to accompany sleep. A small lamp. Let the rain keep tapping gently on the roof, the quilt warm, the lamp nearly out. Now we travel higher still, past rooftops, past treetops, past the reach of any rain at all, up to a small warm observatory where the whole sky is waiting. The observatory sat on a low hill just outside town, its round dome catching the last silver edge of moonlight before the door was pulled closed against the cool night air. Inside, a great telescope stood pointed upward through a narrow open slit in the ceiling, its long dark body angled toward some quiet, patient patch of sky. A single chair sat beside it, worn soft from years of late nights and long, careful watching, its cushion still holding a faint warmth from whoever had been sitting there only minutes before. A small stove in the corner kept the room comfortably warm, its low steady heat pushing back gently against the chill drifting down through the open dome above. Star charts covered one wall, their edges curling slightly with age, each one marking some small patch of the enormous sky in careful, patient detail. Outside, beyond the narrow slit in the dome, stars had begun to gather in their full quiet number, scattered without pattern and yet somehow perfectly arranged, the same soft scattering that had likely looked almost exactly this way for longer than any house, any harbour, any small warm room could possibly remember. There is something different about looking upward instead of around, something that makes the whole tangled business of a single day feel small and easily set down. The universe outside this little dome has no schedule, no evening chores, no candle to blow out or fire to bank low. It simply continues, slow and vast and unhurried, exactly as it always has, exactly as it always will. Whoever sat in that worn, warm chair earlier tonight is gone now, off to their own quiet bed somewhere nearby, leaving only the telescope standing patient in the dark, still angled toward the same quiet patch of sky, still waiting, the way everything in this whole long collection of small warm rooms has been waiting, for someone tired enough, and safe enough, to finally close their eyes. Let the observatory settle into stillness now, the telescope patient, the stove glowing low. We come back down to earth once more, down the hill, past the edge of town, to a small wooden garden shed where the last light of dusk is fading through a dusty window. The garden shed stood at the far end of a long narrow plot, half hidden behind a row of runner beans that had climbed their stakes all summer and now hung heavy and still in the cooling evening air. Inside, the light had faded to a soft grainy blue, filtered through a single dusty window that had not been properly cleaned in years, though somehow that only made the light feel gentler, softer, less like daylight and more like memory. Tools hung along one wall in careful rows, a rake, a trowel, coils of twine, each one worn smooth by years of familiar hands, each one resting now exactly where it belonged. A wooden stool sat pulled up to a low workbench cluttered with seed packets, a pair of gardening gloves left inside out, and a chipped mug that had once held tea and now held nothing but the faint memory of it. The smell inside was rich and particular: damp earth, cut grass, old wood, and beneath it all, the sweet green scent of tomato leaves brushed gently by a passing sleeve. Outside the small window, the garden itself had gone dim and soft-edged, rows of vegetables settling into shadow, a scarecrow standing patient and unmoving at the far end of the plot, watching over nothing in particular now that the birds too had gone quiet for the night. A folded blanket sat draped over an old wicker chair in the corner, placed there for exactly evenings like this one, evenings when the day's work was done and there was nowhere better to sit than in the very shed that had watched over the whole garden grow. Somewhere close by, a wind chime stirred faintly, just once, its soft notes hanging in the still air for a moment before fading back into silence. There is a particular peace found in a workspace at rest, tools clean and hung, tasks finished, the whole small building settling into the same unhurried quiet as the garden around it. The last of the dusk light slipped slowly from the window, and whoever had been sitting on that old wicker chair had already let their eyes drift closed, lulled by soil and twine and the soft, familiar hush of a garden finally at rest. Let the shed grow dark and quiet now, tools hung, blanket settled, the scarecrow standing patient watch outside. We travel next to a small stone platform at the edge of a sleeping village, where a single lamp burns beside empty rails dusted lightly with snow. The train station was small, little more than a stone platform and a single wooden bench beneath a curved iron lamp, its glass casing throwing a warm circle of light across rails dusted with the day's first light snowfall. No trains were due until morning, and the station master's little office at the far end of the platform had already gone dark, its door locked, a hand-lettered sign turned to read closed until dawn. Snow fell lightly here too, though softer than in the mountains, drifting down in occasional loose flakes that settled without hurry onto the empty bench, the iron railings, the neat stacks of firewood piled beside the small waiting room door. Somewhere down the platform, a stray cat had curled itself into a tight comfortable ball on a folded tarpaulin left beside the luggage trolley, entirely unbothered by the cold, entirely certain of its own small warm corner of the world. The rails themselves stretched away in both directions until they disappeared into darkness, silent now, holding no trace of the trains that would come rushing through again come morning, patient in their stillness the way rails always are between one journey and the next. A single suitcase sat forgotten, or perhaps simply left, on the far end of the bench, snow gathering slowly along its top edge in a thin, even layer. The lamp overhead flickered once, its old wiring humming faintly, then steadied again, casting its warm circle a little wider across the platform stone. There is something deeply peaceful about a station with nowhere left to go tonight, its usual bustle entirely absent, replaced instead by falling snow and lamplight and the occasional soft settle of the cat resettling itself more comfortably. Nothing was due to arrive. Nothing needed to depart. The whole small platform existed, for tonight, purely for rest, its rails glinting faintly under the lamp, waiting the way everything in this story has been waiting, patiently, for morning. Let the station rest quietly now beneath its falling snow, the lamp steady, the cat curled warm on its tarpaulin. We follow a narrow lane back toward town one final time, to a farmhouse kitchen where the last of the evening's candles are burning low. The farmhouse kitchen had been full of noise only an hour ago, plates clinking, laughter rising and falling around a long wooden table, the comfortable chaos of a family dinner finally winding down toward its close. Now the table sat mostly cleared, a few candles still burning low in mismatched holders, their flames leaning slightly whenever someone passed by on their way to bed. A large iron stove stood along the far wall, its heat still radiating gently into the room long after the last pot had been lifted off, filling the kitchen with the same easy warmth it had held all evening. Herbs hung drying from the beams overhead, rosemary and thyme and something faintly like lavender, their soft dried scent settling low over the room the way it always did once the cooking smells finally began to fade. A cat lay curled beneath the stove, chosen deliberately for its warmth, tail wrapped neatly over its nose, entirely undisturbed by the quiet clearing away happening around it. Someone moved slowly around the room, blowing out one candle, then another, leaving only a single flame still burning near the window, its small steady light the last thing keeping the deep blue dark outside fully at bay. Through the window, the farmyard had gone silent, the barn a dark shape against a darker sky, the fields beyond rolling away into a stillness so complete it felt almost like held breath. Dishes sat stacked and drying by the sink, their work finished for tonight, resting the same way the whole house was slowly settling into rest, room by room, candle by candle. The last flame flickered once, caught by some small draft slipping in beneath the door, then steadied, burning low and patient, waiting for whoever remained in the kitchen to finally decide it was time to let it go out completely and follow everyone else up to bed. Let the last candle in the farmhouse flicker and hold. There is one more place waiting tonight, higher than all the others, where the walls fall away entirely and only the sky remains. On the below, the city had softened into a low hum of distant sound, a car passing somewhere blocks away, a door closing, the occasional far-off laugh carried up on the still air, all of it muffled and gentle by the time it reached this height. Above, the sky had opened completely, no dome, no glass, no narrow slit to look through, just the whole enormous spread of stars laid out overhead exactly the way they had been laid out over the observatory, over the harbour, over the snow-covered mountains where tonight's journey first began. A steaming mug sat balanced carefully on the table beside the hammock, something warm and spiced, filling the small rooftop world with a scent like cinnamon and orange peel drifting up to mix with the cool night air. The hammock rocked gently, side to side, in the same unhurried rhythm as the train sliding through its silver fields hours ago, as the boat swaying against the harbour's wooden posts, as every gentle motion that had carried this whole long night forward from one warm room to the next. Up here, above the chimney pots and the sleeping pigeons and the whole quiet city below, there was nothing left to do but watch the stars turn slowly overhead, the same patient turning the lighthouse beam had traced across the dark water, the same slow rotation the observatory's telescope had followed for hours. Every room in tonight's journey is still there, waiting quietly in its own small corner of the night. The cottage with its low fire, still holding its warmth against the snow. The lighthouse, its beam still turning, slow and steady, over dark water. The treehouse, rocking gently in the old oak's branches, lanterns still glowing warm and gold. The bakery, its ovens long cooled, the smell of bread still settled deep into the walls. The train, still sliding quietly through silver countryside, carrying no one anywhere in particular. The greenhouse, rain still falling soft and steady against the glass. The lake cabin, fire banked low, the dog still curled and dreaming by the hearth. The bookshop, its cat still asleep atop a stack of unsorted books. The harbour, boats still swaying gently against their moorings. The attic room, rain still tapping its old familiar rhythm against the roof. The observatory, telescope still angled upward, patient beneath a sky that never really sleeps at all. The garden shed, tools hung neat, the scarecrow keeping its quiet watch. The little station, snow gathering softly on an empty bench. The farmhouse kitchen, one last candle burning low. And the rooftop hammock, swaying gently far above the sleeping city, held safe beneath the whole turning sky. You do not need to remember all 13. You do not need to hold on to any of it at all. Just let the images drift, soft and overlapping, snow blending into starlight, rain blending into the slow rock of water, one small warm room folding gently into the next until there is no more need to tell them apart. Perhaps the cottage fire is still glowing somewhere behind your eyes, low and orange, or perhaps it has already softened into the lighthouse's slow-turning beam, or the treehouse lantern, or the last candle in the farmhouse kitchen, bending slightly in some small unseen draught. It does not matter which room you land in. They were all built from the same quiet materials, warmth, stillness, low light, and the simple permission to stop for the night. Let your breathing settle into its own slow rhythm now, the way the train settled into its rails, the way the boat settled into the tide, the way the hammock settled into its own gentle sway high above the sleeping city. Let your shoulders sink a little further into wherever you are resting. Let your jaw soften once more, your hands go heavy and loose, your whole body agreeing, piece by piece, that nothing more is required of it tonight. Let your thoughts go soft and slow and quiet, the way a fire goes soft and slow and quiet long after the last log has been added, glowing without needing to blaze, warm without needing to be watched. Somewhere above all 13 of tonight's small worlds, the same wide sky stretches on, patient and unhurried, holding mountain and harbour and rooftop alike beneath the very same stars. That is the quiet promise of a night like this one. Wherever you are resting, the same sky is resting over you too. There is nowhere else to be tonight. Nothing left to finish. Nothing left to solve. Only a small, quiet collection of rooms, built carefully for rest, each one holding its own low light, each one waiting patiently, the way they always do, for you to finally let go. If tonight's journey helped you drift off, you are always welcome to like, subscribe, or leave a thought below. It helps other tired minds find their way here too, one soft night at a time. And if you happen to still be listening, there will be another quiet world waiting for you next time here on Cosmic Slumber. Another small room, another slow story, another patch of sky, ready whenever you need it. But for now, let it all fade. Let the snow keep falling over the cottage roof. Let the tide keep turning beneath the harbour lights. Let the last candle in the farmhouse finally go dark on its own. Let the hammock keep swaying, slow and easy, high above the sleeping city. And let the stars keep their same slow, patient watch overhead, over every small warm room in tonight's whole quiet collection, and over you too, wherever you are resting. Sleep well, and good night.